This is Dwarzack, one of the largest and fastest growing informal settlements in Freetown. Located on a steep and rugged valley close to the city centre, Dwarzack is a vibrant community that grows each day. Yet its growth is associated with significant land use change, with high rates of deforestation and overcrowding of hilltop areas. As with other settlements in Freetown, Dwarzack's expansion was not accompanied by effective urban planning and adequate provision of basic infrastructure and services, such as road networks, water, sanitation facilities, health facilities, drainage channels, and waste management systems. This underlines the settlement's vulnerability to risks of flooding, rockfalls, landslides, and outbreaks of waterborne and other infectious diseases. For most residents, livelihoods are menaced on a regular basis. With marginal investments in housing or health, risk cycles are hard to escape, and intensive disasters such as flooding and landslides magnify the insecurity of the population. Today, the majority of Freetown's population live in communities characterized as informal. Since the start of the Civil War in the 1990s, the capital has experienced accelerated population growth and rural flight, growing from 400,000 people to more than 1 million today. While human occupation in Dwarzack dates back to the early 1900s, migration increased significantly during the decade-long Civil War and continues so today due to its attractive proximity to the city centre. Estimates of Dwarzack's population range from about 16,500 to 50,000, with a large youth cohort. By 1997, the community was divided into 10 cluster neighbourhoods. In 2016, 2 additional clusters, Nigeria and USA, were added into the community, which occupy the rapidly expanding upstream hillside. As the community continues to grow, particularly in upstream and hilly neighbourhoods like Nigeria, the adverse health effects of overcrowding are aggravated by poor access to water and sanitation facilities. Water shortage during the dry season is severe, evident in the long queues to fetch water from public taps. On the other hand, the rainy season brings a number of burdens and insecurities to daily life, from flooding to infrastructure and livelihood damage. This film was put together as part of our research field trip, which unfolded over the course of 2 weeks, including 5 fieldwork days. We engaged with a total of 70 respondents and participants from 10 neighbourhoods in Dwarzack. We conducted 30 interviews, 16 household surveys, 1 organised focus group discussion, and 1 strategy development workshop with members of the community. With the help of the Sierra Leone Urban Research Centre and the Federation of the Urban and Rural Poor, our Action Learning Alliance builds upon the work of the ESD students in 2018, who successfully mapped out the different risks and investigated the complex governance structure and institutions in Dwarzack. We would like to expand the knowledge on everyday risk accumulation cycles and collective capacities within the community to mitigate and prevent everyday risks. We also aim at contributing to the Dwarzack Community Action Area Plan, a document produced by SLURC in collaboration with FEDUP and community representatives. Bringing together community action into planning, this document provides a framework in which sustainable, just, and inclusive developmental decisions can be made locally. The caps for Dwarzack, Cockle Bay, and the third one to be produced for Porto Recrupa will constitute community-level platforms which will be upscaled by the KNOW project to create a city-wide learning platform in planning equitable urban development in Freetown. This city-wide learning platform will fit within the Transform Freetown agenda championed by the Mayor of Freetown, Yvonne Aki-Sawyer.
Our research shows that risks manifest in different ways in the upstream and downstream clusters of Dwarzack, and this is shaped by the natural environment and the seasonality of the area. On the one hand, proximity of the settlements to streams and slopes influences the way the clusters produce and displace risks in the rainy and dry seasons. On the other, components of the built environment such as the location of basic infrastructure like water and health facilities, access roads, and bridges can either reduce or exacerbate risks. In the absence of formal dumping sites in Dwarzack, many residents use the George Brook Stream and other creeks to dispose of waste, particularly those who live closer to them. These practices increase in the rainy season with peak river discharge. The densely populated cluster of Nigeria is regularly blamed for illegal waste dumping which accumulates in downstream areas and causes flooding and water stagnation. On the other hand, upstream and uphill communities blame the lack of better alternatives for dealing with their waste.
Sanitation is very poor. We don't have dustbin. We have to empty our garbages. So, Dwarzack, we are suffering.
Open burning of waste, especially in the dry season when river discharge is lower, is very common. There is also disproportionate allocation and uneven accessibility to built infrastructure between upstream and downstream settlements. For instance, the only health facility in the community is located downstream. Also, downstream clusters share 7 water points compared to 6 in the larger and denser upstream clusters. School-going children and women who spend hours navigating the rocky terrains of the settlements in search of water for drinking and daily household chores are more exposed to the risks of injuries on a daily basis. Built infrastructure like bridges and drainages were encountered throughout the studied areas, notably in France, Italy, Morocco, Germany, and England, and are in place to respond to flooding events. Historically, the community has faced intensive perennial flood disasters in the rainy season. However, in 2018, this occurrence was averted for the first time in 15 years by the construction of a long stretch of concrete bridge and drainage system from Italy to France, funded by Catholic Relief Services with community support from the Dwarzack Community Disaster Management Committee. The CDMC is a central actor in disaster response in Dwarzack. It mobilizes residents in the clusters and trains them as first and second respondents in emergency situations. However, all respondents of the 16 households surveyed in France, Italy, and Morocco living close to bridges and drainages confirmed that these infrastructures have reduced rather than eliminated flood-related risks in their communities. Our findings show that such infrastructures can become sites of solid waste accumulation, amplifying the exposure to everyday risks of diseases such as malaria, cholera, and acute respiratory tract infections. Health records at the George Brook Community Health Center confirmed this, with children and pregnant women being the most affected. There are diverse risk coping and disaster management capacities in different territories of Dwarzack at individual, household, and community levels. Some households use some of their waste as compost for gardening. Others constructed a fence for protection against rockfalls or built their own water points to serve other community members. At community levels, religious leaders can be important in mobilizing collective action.
So it's like we coordinate to ourselves as leaders, not as a group. You go around using the tools, local tools, go around cleaning the gutters and then telling them the awareness. Now it's to be affected, flooding come your house to be affected, and doing the thing to ourselves.
An important finding of this research was the territorial fragmentation of the various community groups involved in collective action within Dwarzack, with priorities ranging from flood disaster response, waste management, to saving money.
Then we say we are from the inside and we are not part of it. For this our father, he came in with the initiative that no, this place is not supposed to be when we want to go over only during the dry. So let us create a bridge that we must go ahead. So we start donating through the church and we call also the community people.
Many of the community-based organizations, such as Ataya Bays, Sustainable Brothers, and Takwa Sisters, among others, were located downstream and focused primarily on waste management initiatives, such as sensitization, community cleaning, waste collection, and recycling. We observed that downstream community-based organizations were more familiar with key community organizations like the Federation of the Urban Poor than those found upstream. Considering that the Federation's office is found downstream calls attention to the need to publicize the organization to upstream settlements to participate in the Federation's initiatives, especially with the CDMC. A consequence of the lack of interaction, collaboration, and synergy between these community groups is the lack of capacity to scale up waste management initiatives and the inability to implement effective internal resource mobilization strategies to efficiently address problems of poor waste management and mitigate the small-scale, extensive everyday risks.
with the overarching aim being to effectively organize people and to efficiently mobilize logistics to disrupt everyday risk accumulation in Dwarzack. We came up with a strategy with 3 thematic pillars to build stronger relationships between collective associations and help strengthen their existing internal governance mechanisms. Our first strategy seeks to foster relationships and improve risk governance among CBOs and collectives by establishing intra-cluster networks. We recommend a steering committee to be created within the next 6 to 12 months in each cluster, consisting of representatives of the CDMC and all other CBOs operating in both upstream and downstream clusters. At the community level, this will help address the problem of territory fragmentation of collective organizations by making risk governance and collective action more inclusive, transparent, and accountable. It also has implications at city level. First, since CDMC was initially consulted during the dreaming phase of the CAAP, the steering committee will join other previously excluded CBOs and community members to participate in the next stage, which seeks to scale up into a citywide learning platform and engage with the Transform Freetown agenda. Second, it will expand the disaster response of the CDMC to also small-scale everyday risks driven by poor waste management in the settlements. CBOs like Takwa Sisters, who designs a waste management educational program for children at schools, should be embraced and scaled up by the cluster networks within the next 2 to 3 years. Thirdly, an opportunity is also presented for co-learning with the ESD Moiba group, who has already developed a strategy for the settlement to engage school children in waste management and sanitation lessons. The second strategy focuses on improving information sharing and knowledge transfer in order to realize effective communication, synergies, and collaborations between collective organizations within clusters. In the short term, we propose a communication channel such as WhatsApp that would help to disseminate information and receive feedback from a wider audience. We also recommend the creation of publicity materials to increase the visibility of CBOs and help promote their work, especially in the waste management sector. In the medium term, we propose a record system held at FedUp that will systematically document information on collectives, such as their contact details, sectors of operation, capacities possessed, logistics needed, among others. Access to this data will improve the spatial outreach to community members and CBOs in future planning for FedUp and initiatives like CAAP. It will also serve as baseline data for use by other citywide learning platforms and programs of action to address risks in Freetown. In the long term, a meeting space in each Dwarzack cluster should be operated by the steering committee. Our third strategic pillar is resource mobilization. Along with the formation of cluster networks, the lack of resources, such as funds and logistics, are noted in the operation of the collective organizations. In response to this, we propose a money-saving mechanism that will create a common fund within each cluster to generate internal funding for collective actions. FedUp started the first savings group in 2008 through support from Shack and Slum Dwellers International. With its registered success, we recommend that the organization engages the steering committees of the clusters and assists them to establish the common fund within the next 1 to 3 years. While the steering committee will manage the funds on behalf of members, FedUp will play an advisory and oversight role in how funds are disbursed for disaster risk reduction. Possible use of this fund will be to acquire bins or other equipment and tools for community cleaning programs. By 5 years' time, we propose that the Common Fund, if well established, will incentivize unemployed youth in Dwarzack to collect waste for recycling. Since waste management already features in the CAAP document for the community, this strategy serves to contribute to a wider community plan which has already had a connection to the citywide agenda. There are, however, some limitations to our research. First, the accessibility challenges such as inadequate pathways limited us from reaching upstream clusters further uphill, such as Cameroon and Argentina. Also, further research is required to understand how chiefs and councillors work with collective organizations and CBOs. Finally, we did not engage with issues like land tenure and security caused by rapid population growth, especially in upstream denser clusters. These are equally important areas that should be considered for future research work. Overall, we hope that by using Dwarzack as an example, understanding of risk accumulation and mitigation could be deepened, and collective capacities could be increased and collaborated within the settlement and scaled up at the city level in Freetown.